down a little bit, right? Like I'm saying, I don't see any evidence pointing in the direction that Israel did this. However, a separate question, which you can connect to that if you want to. I just want to be clear that I'm not connecting to that because I don't see a reason to, or a clear piece of evidence to. But there are the claims being made, Benjamin Netanyahu himself trying to milk Charlie Kirk's death. And now there are other claims being made about what Charlie Kirk's state of mind was about Israel during that time. And that in itself is an interesting question. And Candace, in this episode, she did at one point call on me and Tucker Carlson to come forward with whatever information we have. She was saying we were both at this last event. So like, what was it like? What was his state of mind? What were the things being said?
Dave Smith just dropped the receipts on Charlie Kirk, and the Zionist gatekeepers are panicking. He literally pulls up private text where Charlie says he barely disagreed with Dave's anti-war, anti-Israel takeover arguments, while Netanyahu and the neocon crowd are out here trying to hijack Charlie's legacy and pretend he was just Ben Shapiro with a Turning Point logo. And now Candace Owens is calling on Dave to spill everything he knows. Stay with me. This part of the Matrix, they really don't want you to see. Let's plug in.
And so I thought that was kind of interesting. And I'm thinking, and so I thought maybe the best I could do here as a response to the audience being upset about the last episode is like, I'll just come clean with everything I know, including like some fucking text messages between me and Charlie Kirk, which I figured there were a couple that I thought were kind of relative. So after listening to the Candace episode, I thought about it and I was like, almost like trying to replay in my mind, like what exactly was said when we were hanging out in that green room. Because we did hang out for quite a bit before the debate. And the truth is, there was nothing I could say tangibly about that encounter like demonstrated that Charlie was changing his mind about Israel or something like that. He was very friendly the entire time. I was me. And so I was, at first, what happened was first I went in there and it was just me and Charlie and his guy. I'm blanking on his name right now. I apologize, but he's the guy who's like on his podcast. So it was them two, and then Josh Hammer came in, and it was like all of us for a little bit. And then Charlie's buddy left, and it was just me, Charlie, and Josh for a little bit. And so at the beginning, before Josh Hammer came in, we did talk about Israel a little bit. And I was needling Charlie, like I tend to do in those situations, like, because he was already talking about, we started talking about issues right away. He was saying like, but everything he was saying was kind of like what you would think Charlie Kirk would be saying in that situation. He was saying things like, he goes, look, I'm with you. I'm against the forever wars, and I can't stand the McCains and the Cheneys and all those guys. And then I was going, yeah, Charlie, but like, right? Like I was just like, Charlie was a well-read guy enough that I would just be like, but you already know who the neocons are married at the hip to, right? Like, what was that all about? Or don't you know that they're basically just the American Likud party? Like, that, right? And it was Charlie Kirk. He would just kind of disarm you with his kindness. Like, he would kind of laugh, and then he'd look around with a big smile and he'd go, I get your point. And then he'd pivot to he'd be like, I just really, like, as a Christian, I had really spiritual experiences when I went to Israel and stood in the exact place where Jesus performed miracles and all this. And I really value the holy sites being protected and the bond between, the Jewish people, like Jesus was a Jew and like all that. And I was like, okay, I get all of that. But like, also we could do that without genociding our neighbors, right? Probably. And he'd kind of laugh and say, now, if I'm being completely honest, I got the impression that Charlie really kind of knew I was right. If I'm being completely honest, that's how I felt. But I got nothing tangible I could point to justify that feeling. All I could tell you is that in the room, I kind of felt like he knows I got a really good point here, but he's kind of not in a position where he can admit it. That's how I felt. But that is purely just a vibe I got. There was nothing he said that actually backed up that was his feeling. And then
Now let's peel back the hidden layer. Dave tells the whole story about being in the green room with Charlie. He's needling him about neocons and Israel, calling them the American Likud Party. And what does Charlie do? He laughs, he smiles, he deflects to faith. I had spiritual experiences in Israel. I love the holy sites. Jesus was a Jew. All the standard Christian Zionist talking points. But Dave says something crucial. If I'm being completely honest, it felt like Charlie knew I was right. He just wasn't in a position to admit it. Let that sink in. That is the sound of a man caught between conviction and contracts. Think about the position Charlie was in. Biggest youth organizer on the right, surrounded by Zionist handlers, donors, think tank guys breathing down his neck. An entire brand built on being pro-Israel equals conservative. Now imagine you start realizing, wait, the anti-war guys, the people calling out the lobby, kind of have a point. That's an earthquake under the whole conservative business model. And instead of engaging honestly, what did the machine do? They lied about what Candace said, dismissed her as crazy and anti-Semitic, pretended Charlie was never questioning Israel at all.
When Josh Hammer came in, I don't even remember. I remember at one point he was like interested in talking to me about like how I'm good on borders and abortion and most libertarians are bad on that. And then we got into a whole conversation about how libertarian first principles lead you to not being for open borders. And it was just like other stuff that wasn't that topic. It was kind of like a thing where Charlie had been saying, and I think I talked about this the week we did a podcast with like my thoughts on the event right after the event, but once Josh Hammer came in the room, Charlie had been stressing the whole time how he really wanted a good faith exchange of ideas. And he didn't want this to devolve into name calling or be anything, and that he really wanted to have a good, honest exchange between me and Josh. And so I said yes, and Josh said the same thing. Josh said absolutely yes. And so then we all the three of us had a very pleasant conversation, and we ended up talking about other topics. And I think part of that was just like, to keep it light and friendly in the green room. Like, we're about to go out there and debate this topic, so let's just talk about immigration, where we all agree for a little bit before we go out there. Then, as I pointed out before, Josh Hammer goes out, and by the end of his opening statement, he said he was disgusted to be on the stage with me. And I had pointed out like what a snake behavior that was, because literally we had just had like a 40-minute pleasant conversation, like we were all being friends. And then he got out there and said he was disgusted to be in my presence or whatever. Anyway, then I wiped the floor with Josh Hammer, and that's how the thing ended. So I didn't really have anything, when Candace was like, come forward with whatever information you have. As I was thinking about it, I was like, I don't really have anything there. But then I did think to myself, I was like, like me and Charlie Kirk have texted a fair amount of times over the years. Like, let me go back and just see what we said exactly. Because I remember he had gone out of his way to like text nice stuff. And I said this publicly before too, that was our relationship essentially, that he just started reaching out to me. I had done his podcast a time or two, I believe. And he would just text me like nice things before, and then he invited me to that Turning Point event. So I will say, first of all, very weird feeling going back through the text messages of someone when they just died. Just there's something about that's kind of surreal and not a nice feeling. But I did that, and then I did find a couple text messages that I think are kind of relevant to this part of the conversation. I just want to make it clear, I'm not stoking anything that says Israel did it, but just if we're having the conversation about where was Charlie's state of mind and how did he feel about Israel, these are, I think, kind of relevant. And let me just start by saying this, because I was a little torn about whether or not I should read these. I've never done that before. I've never read private text messages or released, like when people do that sometimes when they're arguing with someone, like they'll release screenshots of DMs or something like that. I never have done that in my life, or I don't think so. And I don't like that. I think like that, like things that are said privately should stay private. But just like in this case, it does seem like this is like I don't know, it's like the biggest political assassination of our lifetimes. And this is a huge debate over where his state of mind was. And I do think that a lot of the fucking Zionists are kind of lying when they act like, no, Charlie was just the biggest, like he was just Ben Shapiro and nothing else was going on in his head. That doesn't seem to be quite right. Now, I've talked about this quite a bit, that I thought the big dynamic going on here was that he still needed these kids. He still needed his young activists, and they were abandoning Israel. But I actually forgot about exactly what he said in a couple of these things. So I'll read them just to be fully transparent. You guys can make of it what you will. I think I already know what a lot of you are going to make of it, but this is real. And this is what was said to me. So here, let me, because I took a couple screenshots of these, but let me just actually read up through them, because these are the ones that I thought were relevant. I mean, there's some other texts here where it's just, I mean, he texted me saying he really loved my testimony on Tucker Carlson about praying to God in the hospital when my daughter was born and stuff, but this just doesn't seem as relevant. But these two texts I thought were pretty relevant. So this one is from Sunday, April 13th at 8:01 p.m. He texted me, listen to you on Rogan. Now, this is like a day or two after the Douglas Murray debate. So I debated Douglas Murray on the Joe Rogan experience. And it was a big show.
Big debate.
At the time, it was a big show. I guess Candace Owens changed the definition of big show at this point. In hindsight, a teeny little show. So this was a Charlie Kirk, unprompted, texted me about the Douglas Murray debate. Now, just like kind of keeping in mind, and I'll fully disclaim here, Charlie Kirk's a really nice guy. You could chalk a lot of this up to him being nice, but the Douglas Murray debate with me, like I'm not overstating it. This was like this may have been the biggest high profile debate on Israel. And this is what Charlie Kirk wrote to me Sunday, April 13th at 8:01 p.m. Listen to you on Rogan. You did well, despite me being more on the pro-Israel side. Very little I disagree with what you said. One point, when Douglas was going on about you using arguments from authority, it's a ridiculous claim. You were using original source quotes to prove their motives, all capital and motives, not their analysis of geopolitics, etc. Two totally different things. You were right on that point 100%. Keep up the good work. Hope to cross paths at some point soon. I'm sorry, hope to cross paths at some point. And I wrote back, thanks, Charlie. I really appreciate that. Now, again, I'm not saying anyone should make any more of this than there is there, but like, this is Charlie Kirk. He told me privately that there was very little that he disagreed with.
Dave Smith keeps it real. He pulls out the receipts. He reads them. Listen to you on Rogan. You did well despite me being more on the pro-Israel side. Very little I disagree with you, he said. You were right on that point 100%. Keep up the good work. You don't text that to somebody if you think they're a dangerous anti-Israel lunatic. That's not Ben Shapiro mode. That's not Netanyahu mode. That's a man saying publicly, I'm here. Privately, I'm a lot closer to you than I can admit. That's the hidden layer. Charlie wasn't just a mindless Israel puppet. He was wrestling with the truth. And the system around him couldn't allow that to be public.
I will say, like, Candace calling on me to like release what I know. That is one. And I think that's not completely insignificant. Like, I think that does at least demonstrate that this wasn't Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro was not sending me this text message. Let's just say that. I mean, I don't want anyone to make too much of this. I'm just kind of putting the information out there. I guess we've already established you're going to make of it what you will. Here's the other one that I thought was kind of worth what. So he sent me like a tweet that he had posted, which was back about here. So he this is public, right? So you can see this, but he sent it to me. So he quote tweeted me a post that I had about the murder of those two Israeli embassy staff members. If you remember that, Rob, you remember that story? They got murdered in DC or something like that. And I just had a post about, like, you know, how wrong political violence is and how anyone who thinks you're helping the poor Palestinians by murdering some embassy workers, you're not. And then Charlie had a long quote tweet to that, which this is public. If you want to find it, it starts with their names, which were Sarah Milgram and Yuran Lichinsky. And he says they were two beautiful young people with their whole lives ahead of them. Talks about how the murder was senseless and evil and horrifying. It's a little bizarre to read that in the context of today, but then he had a whole section of the post where he said, I must push back against one thing. All over X, I see claims that some people have, quote, blood on their hands. By the way, this is just a really interesting tweet. I haven't read this till right now. I didn't click on it, but he sent me it in our text thread. But this is Charlie Kirk, by the way, talking about this stuff, pretty relevant to today. He said, I must push back against one thing. All over X, I see claims that some people have, quote, blood on their hands simply because they've made tweets attacking Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israel government, or the war in Gaza. No. And then he goes off on a whole thing. You can look up the tweet if you want to say it, but he's making the point that it was horrible what happened to them, but it's also messed up to, like, blame anybody who was criticizing Israel for now being responsible for them doing this. So he sent me that tweet. And I responded back as he sent me this at noon on May 22nd, and I responded back at 12:01. I said, I was literally reading it as you texted. And I said, thank you. I really appreciate that. We need cooler heads to prevail here. It's a very dangerous situation.
Guys, here's the Matrix reveal. This whole thing proves two terrifying truths at the same time. The system will weaponize a man's death to push a narrative he was already moving away from. Netanyahu cherry-picking his letter. Neocons pretending he never doubted them. Gatekeepers calling Candace crazy while knowing about texts like this. The right-wing base is way more awake than they want to admit. Charlie saw the crowd shift at his own events. Dave saw the students' reactions. Candace felt the backlash when she refused to bend the knee. And now, even after a public assassination, the system's first instinct isn't, let's get full transparency, all the facts, cameras in the courtroom. It's, shut up. Stop asking questions. Anyone who digs deeper is a conspiracy theorist. So here's where I land on this. Dave Smith did what real men are supposed to do. He honored his friend by telling the truth, even when it cuts against powerful interest. The texts prove Charlie was wrestling with Israel, not blindly marching in lockstep. And the hysterical reaction from the neocon crowd proves they're more worried about controlling the narrative than honoring Charlie's actual journey. If you still think this is just business as usual politics, you're not paying attention. We are watching the Matrix rewrite code in real time. On this channel, we're not doing that. We're going to follow the receipts, Dave, Candace, Tucker, whoever. And we're going to keep asking the question they hate the most. Who's really in control? And why are we never allowed to talk about it? Thanks for watching.